With all the offensive talent in the ACC, which 5 teams have the best 5 offenses in the conference? I'm going to discuss it next on the Locked On Clemson podcast.
You are Locked On Clemson, your daily podcast on the Clemson Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Clemson family? Let's get locked in. Welcome back to the Locked On Clemson podcast, your daily podcast covering your Clemson Tigers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find and follow me on Twitter at DP_NFL. I'm a national scout with the Draft Network, as well as part of the co-host team of the Locked On NFL Draft podcast. And guys, I appreciate y'all for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today and every day, Monday through Friday. And whenever I drop these episodes, whether it's via YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify on the audio side, I appreciate all the love and support. Continue to subscribe and download every single episode, guys. But man, do we have another great show? I think every show is a great show. We have another great show where we're going to get into on the Prowl. 4-star 2024 cornerback recruit that actually committed months ago, but we're going to get into his game and talk about his scouting report a little bit and what he's going to bring to the table once he taps in after his senior season. We're going to talk about the Clemson Tigers strength of schedule. CBS Sports ranked the ACC teams via the strength of schedules, and we're going to read into that blurb and talk about that, as well as ranking the top 5 offensive teams, top 5 offensive rankings in the ACC. So, guys, without further ado, let's get into it. Who are the top 5 offenses in the ACC, and where does Clemson land? Well, let me show you the graphic. Let me pull it up, similar to what I did with the top 5 head coaches. Now, these aren't my rankings, but I'm just going to react to them and tell you what I think. At number 1, we have North Carolina. At number 2, we have Florida State. Your Clemson Tigers ranking at number 3. Duke is at number 4, and Pittsburgh is at number 5. So before I really get to truly talk about Clemson, when you look at this list, guys, talk to me in the comments now. Let me know in the comments on YouTube when you see this list, and for those watching, what do you think about this list? Do you not just the Clemson, but the other teams? If you know anything about your competitors in the ACC offensively, is there anything that stands out to you? I think for me, Pittsburgh at 5. Not saying Pittsburgh at 5 is Pat Narduzzi was one of the top 5 coaches, voted by Locked On ACC. Shout out to my girl Candace Cooper over there. You know what I mean? But I agree with Pat Narduzzi being a top 5 coach, but in terms of Pittsburgh being a top 5 offense, that's a little tough for me. They've lost some pieces along the offensive line. Lost Izzy, who was their star running back last year, Izzy Abandakanda, who was an absolute home run hitter and monster for them, and he's now was selected 4th, 5th round to the New York Jets. So. And I think the biggest question mark about Pittsburgh's offense and them being at number 5 and inside the top 5 is the quarterback position. And it's Phil Dracovic, if I'm not mistaken. I believe that's who's going to be their quarterback. And I'm not saying that he's a bad player of any sort, but when I look at that, that's just really difficult for me, because this is a guy who had all the hype about 2 years ago, back in 2020, coming out the COVID year. A lot of people were excited for him in terms of his NFL draft value and status, and it just did not pan out the way that most people expected it, right? So that for me, I'm like, okay, why not NC State? And I think NC State has a better quarterback room, whether it is Brennan Armstrong, you know what I mean, or the young sophomore that they have as well, who's a baller himself. So it's like that is just very hard for me to sit there and look at Phil Dracovic and to say, you know what, that he's better. I don't think he's better than Brennan Armstrong. And, from what I've seen from watching these guys on TV, even though Brennan Armstrong had a really rough year last year, for me, Brennan Armstrong's arm talent is light years better than Phil Dracovic. So, and then you got MJ Morris, who's the young kid who stepped in when Devin Leary went down last year, and he also is a two-sport athlete. He's a dual threat athlete in terms of being a dual threat quarterback at the quarterback position where he can run the ball and throw the ball. He's got a rocket of an arm as well. So, and he's a great kid. Met him in person. But that's just tough for me. So I do think Pittsburgh. I think North Carolina State should be there instead of Pittsburgh. Duke being at 4 over behind Clemson, I don't really have a problem with, even though I did rank Riley Leonard over Cade Klubnik, because Riley Leonard is an absolute he's a tank, man, 6'4", 215, and he's probably gonna run the 4.5. I'll be surprised if he hits 4.6. I think it's 4.5. But they have some weapons, but I think that when you look at Clemson's offense, I'm perfectly fine with Clemson's offense being above them in totality. The running game, the offensive line, the other skill positions, I think that favors Clemson. But here's where I take Clemson being at 3, I'm fine with. I'm truthfully, I would probably say Clemson could be 2. I think North Carolina right now, just off the cuff, just looking at North Carolina, I think they should be at 3 potentially. I think there's a case for that. I'm going to tell you why, guys. The reason why is not because of the quarterback. Drake May is an absolute stud. Okay, he's a stud. He's an absolute baller, and I think we all understand what he's going to bring to the table. But for me, as I bring my nice mug back on the screen for those watching on YouTube, but for me, with them being number 1, losing Antoine Green, losing Josh Downs, who was their best receiver last year, the security blanket. They do have a tight end that a lot of people in the draft community is excited about to see what can go on with him. They have some unproven weapons at wide receiver that we don't know what to expect just yet, right? So that's where I kind of have some trepidation and it's a little bit of concern. To me, Florida State is number 1, and I don't even think it's close. Florida State is the number 1 offense in the ACC on paper right now. When you have Jordan Travis, who's a Heisman candidate, right? Trey Benson, one of the most physical and just downhill runners in college football. Then you have the mismatch, Mr. Mismatch is what I call him, Johnny Wilson at 6'7", 230. He's playing outside wide receiver. It's very difficult to defend him. Shout out to Nate Wiggins because he did a really good job in 2022 versus him. But then they brought in through the transfer portal Jaheim Bell, who's a tight end, a slot wide receiver, and a running back, all built into one, and as well as getting Keon Coleman, the 6'4", 215, 20-pound receiver from Michigan State. And it's like, how do you defend all of that? How do you do it? It's so difficult. That is Florida State's number 1 offense to me, bar none. I don't think it's close. But I think that there's a case that Clemson, with I think Adam Randall at 6'2", 230, being a big body guy, I think we could see a development of him. I got to go into the tape so I can, make him one of the check the tape candidates as well. But, I've talked about Antonio Williams. I love his game. I love what he can bring to the table. To me, he is the best receiver on the team right now. Right. And then you can get something from Turner and, just this offense to me has more weapons right now that I am willing to rely upon. And then the run game, at worst, you can run the ball with physicality and versatility and creativity with your running backs. So Will Shipley and Phil Maffa, right? The 6'1", 225-pound, just stack house running back, right? So when I look at the situation, I think Florida State should be at 1. I say Clemson should be at 2. I think you could look at North Carolina and out of respect to Drake May, you put him at 3 until you see what these weapons really look like. Because this list is bound to look different once we get to the season, right? Because North Carolina State's offense can start humming and they can be better than Clemson's potentially, right? We don't want that, but it's possible. They could be better than North Carolina's for all we know, right? Same thing with Florida State. Jordan Travis has a regression and not a progression. He's going to hold that offense back. So by the time we get through the season, yes, a lot of this will be different. But I would say this, it's just a simple fact of the matter is, for me, I think there's a case for Clemson to be at 2 over a North Carolina as a full offense, as a total offense. I think I'll take Clemson's O-line, Clemson's run game, and the rest of the receivers from Clemson at this particular time until before we get to the season, just in the preseason right now. I think Clemson should be number 2. But guys, listen, that is the ACC offensive ranking. Shout out to Candace Cooper and the crew over at Locked On ACC for that ranking. But guys, coming up next, we're going to get into CBS Sports and where they rank the Clemson Tigers based on their strength of schedule in the ACC. Coming up next on the Locked On Clemson podcast, your team every day. Take your first swing at betting on Major League Baseball with FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. You heard me correctly, guys. That's $200 back, right? Now, what do you got to do? You just got to bet $20. That's it. You bet $20 and you'll land $200 back in bonus bets. Win or lose, or draw, it doesn't really matter. You still will get the $200 back in bonus bets. That's $200 that you can spend betting on everything from the money line to the over-under, also to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All of this on the app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. So there's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get up to $200 back in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon because FanDuel is the official partner of Major League Baseball. The 2023 ACC Strength of Schedule rankings are out by CBS Sports' Chip Patterson. He dropped those actually not yesterday, but 2 days ago on the 28th. And he basically, ranked them. And the headline is crazy. The headline says Florida State faces a daunting slate. And that Georgia Tech will have the toughest schedule of all the ACC teams as the conference moves away from divisions. So let's get into the top 10. Let's start at the top. Georgia Tech at number 1 with the pretty much the strongest schedule, right? The worst schedule that you could have. At number 2 is Florida State. At number 3 is Duke. Number 4 is Wake Forest. Number 5 is your Clemson Tigers. Number 6 is North Carolina. Number 7 is Syracuse. Number 8 is Pittsburgh. Number 9 is Miami. Number 10 is North Carolina State. I'm just finish it off with the 14. Number 10 is North Carolina State. Number 11 is Virginia. 12 is Virginia Tech. 13 is Louisville. 14 is Boston College. So when you look at, again, Clemson's in the top 5, I think, reading his blurb, he said that the 6 teams between 5 and 10 are interchangeable. And I'll agree with him in the sense of Clemson does not have an easy schedule. It is a tough schedule because when you think about the fact that they have some high, like, I'm gonna read this to you guys. As I said, the 6 teams between 5 and 10 in their rankings are almost interchangeable. They all have some high difficulty, some high difficulty. Also, a couple games that make those challenging spots seem more manageable. And you talked about Clemson. For example, Clemson has Notre Dame, Florida State, and North Carolina on the schedule. But luckily, all 3 of those games are where? Death Valley. They're at home. But there is a tricky back-to-back road trip at Miami and at North Carolina State in October. But the Tigers get their off week just before that, ultimately playing the annual South Carolina game on the road, tipped the scales to push Clemson to 5. And I think that is – I don't really have a big problem with it because, again, and even though, yes, North Carolina, North Carolina, Florida State, and I think it was Notre Dame. Those games were at home, right? But those are tough games. And not just that game, but going on the road. I'm telling you, and I promise you, if Clemson blows out Duke, if they blow out Duke, I will eat my words, okay? I will eat my word. But Monday, September 4th, 8 p.m. on ESPN, 8 p.m. Eastern, going into Duke in a night game with Riley Leonard, I think Riley Leonard, who Higgins, the receiver, I forget the tight end's name, but they got I think it's Dwayne Carter, the defensive lineman, defensive tackle, defensive end hybrid guy who knows how to pressure the quarterback. This is a game that in the NFL they call certain games trap games, and if Clemson goes into this game with the mindset that this is just the same old Duke, it's going to be a trap game. So I think that's, when we talk about having a tough schedule, you're opening a game, you open the season out on a game on the road at night versus a talented team, a talented, dangerous quarterback. Come on, then you go a couple weeks later, right? I think week 4, week 5. It should be week 4 or 5. Yeah, you host Florida State at home. They don't have a time for that yet, right? Then you go to Syracuse, Wake Forest comes in, and that's when they talk about having, then you get the bye week, you get the off week between you get that off week from the Wake Forest game to Miami. That's that 2-game stretch of Miami and North Carolina State, 21st and 28th. But see, that's a stretch. Look at that stretch. Listen, look at this stretch, guys. All right, look at this stretch. Miami on the road, North Carolina State on the road. The following week, Notre Dame comes in, right? And mind you, their quarterback lit us up last year. The quarterback lit that defense up last year. It's Sam Hartman. He knows how to play the Clemson Tigers defense, right? Now, and then you get Georgia Tech, which is a tune-up game. It's a game that you don't look ahead, but you take care of business. Get your starters in, blow them out, get off the field, let the backups in, right? And then you close the game. You close the season out hosting Drake May in North Carolina and going on the road to Columbia to face South Carolina, who beat you last year, right? With Spencer Rattler. So, and Spencer Rattler is a guy that's fighting for an NFL, his NFL draft stock and raising that. So I don't think any of this is easy. I do think that this is a pretty decently tough schedule. And I think that's why the defense is so key, because the defense can, those early games while Kate is working through the motions as a new starter, right? Working through the butterflies and the nervousness and things of that nature, not trying to decide when not to do too much and when to do not to do too little, right? Like, it's a fine balance in that, and I think he's, as a young player, he has to develop that and learn that. And once he does that, I think he's going to be fine, guys. But again, that comes with time. It's not something that you just walk onto the field day one and just be like, I know exactly what to do. No, you got to take your bumps, your bruises, and your lumps. Luckily, he had the North Carolina game, and they had to start versus Tennessee. And I'm going to go through that tape, both of those tapes, and then break it down in a check the tape, a 2-part check the tape segment in probably next week sometime. But get a little ahead of myself. But I want to say I agree with them being top 5, because that is a tough schedule. But is it doable? Is it manageable? Is it winnable? Yes. They got to take care of business, right? The games you have to win them. Win them early, where you can sit your guys, rest your guys, and allow them to their bodies to be ready, because this is there's parts of this schedule. Well, let me go back to it real quick, and I think it was the stretch of that 3-game stretch, right? After the off week, after the bye, where you go on the road twice, Miami, North Carolina State, and then host Notre Dame. That's a stretch. And then, because that's what's tough. The schedule is tough in stretches, because you got that 3-game stretch, then you got the last 2 games, which is the stretch, right? Then you have 2 games within the first 4 to 5 weeks that are really tough opponents when you look at Duke and then Florida State. So all I'm saying, guys, is that this is a tough schedule, but it's manageable and it's doable and it's winnable. But you want to know how you continue to win those tough type of matchups? You continue to win the recruiting and continue to attack on the prowl. And we're going to talk about a 2024 4-star cornerback that I'm finally getting a chance to talk about. He committed a couple months ago, so we're going to talk about him next on the prowl when we get back on the Locked On Clemson podcast. Coming up next on the Prowl. ladies and gentlemen, 4-star 2024 cornerback recruit Tavoy Fagan. This is a young man that for most, he's not consensus, but when you look at the 4 recruiting sites, 1.com, 24/7 Sports, ESPN, and Rivals.com, 3 out of the 4 have him as a 4-star recruit. 1.com only has him as a 3-star, which, caught me off guard. But back in November 20th, he committed on November 20th, and he was kind of, going through, not just Clemson, but you had Florida. So Clemson beat out Florida, UCF, and Alabama. And so let me see, are there any other school, LSU, as well as Miami, when it pertained to this young man. And when you look at his size, right, you got a 5'10", 165-pound corner from Carroll Day. And again, winning out of state recruiting from Tampa, Florida, right? So just going over his scouting report per 24/7 Sports, a quick-footed defensive back with solid technique that spent much of his junior season working on the outside for a talented Carroll Wood Day program. Not going to blow many away with his build, but looks to have some additional length in the arms and will likely undergo a physical transformation once lifting in a college weight room. Weaves like a seasoned veteran while in reverse in his back pedal and will use a variety of different turns to get where he needs to be. Spirited as a tackler for someone of his stature, as he isn't afraid to lower the shoulder pad while providing run support. Tested reasonably well spring after freshman season, clocking a 4.2 in the short shuttle and a 4.7 in the 40-yard dash. Also jumped over 110 inches. Must eventually add mass and learn how to redirect with his hands, but has some tools to work with once he enrolls at the college of his choice, which is your Clemson Tigers. Could settle in as a boundary or field corner at a Power 5 level, but ceiling ultimately might be highest at safety in the defense that favors cover 2, given how he takes strong angles and plays the football in the air. Had 7 pass breakups in his first 7 games of his junior season. Should add plenty of value on special teams. He also runs track. A young man that in February 2020 posted a win-aided 11.67 with a 2.4 2.4 split in the 100-meter dash to go along with a 23.64 in the 200-meter dash. Started his prep career, over at Tampa Catholic. So this is a young man that is a multi-sport athlete, right? And the 4.7, I know some people would probably say, DP 4.7, that's not great. That's not, but that was after his freshman season. All right. And typically, as these kids train and get stronger and everything else, they get faster too. So he's a track guy. I don't think he's going to run a 4.7, but if he did run a 4.5, 4.6, how can he still be utilized in this defense, right? Well, when you look at Nate Wiggins, he doesn't play a ton of press man-to-man coverage, right? He doesn't play a ton of it. He can, but he doesn't play a lot. What does he do? He's playing more off coverage, some side saddles, some half zone turn alignment, and he's playing typically protecting the deep thirds because you rarely, no matter how fast a guy is, Tyreek Hill, it's like the fastest guy in the league, right? But if you're playing cover 3 and you're playing deep thirds and you're giving him 7 yards of cushion, he's typically not going to beat you over the top unless you make a mistake, right? But you want to protect deep and force everything underneath and then trigger downhill and help the run and help in terms of tackling. And he knows how to tackle and he knows how to use his Fagan knows how to use his frame, and his arm length and everything else to be a plus tackler in the run game and run support. So I think you can play him off coverage, play him in some zone, but seeing that he is like that 24/7 Sports believe his best ball or his highest ceiling would be at safety is intriguing to me because it's like, okay, typically you save that for a guy that can't cover, you know what I mean? So that's typically how that goes. If a guy can't cover, then they'll say, yeah, he'd be better at safety. But if he can cover, I just don't see the need to put him at safety unless he two reasons. If he can't cover, you put him at safety. If he can cover, but there are athletic limitations and man-to-man, or his ability to attack, or not attack, but carry routes vertically, then yes, okay, I get it. But again, almost a consistent 4-star recruit that has a lot of development left physically. He's listed at 165. You want to get him up to 170. I mean, we've seen Cam Dantzler go in the first 2 rounds of the NFL draft, if I'm not mistaken. And then we saw this past draft, Emmanuel Forbes, who was like 166, 170, maybe 173 on a good day in the SEC. And he got drafted top 15, top 20. So it's not a kiss of death for him. I think you just want to see him bulk up a little bit if you can get Tavoy Fagan to get a little stronger and everything like that. But guys, that's our show on the Prowl. We talked about Tavoy Fagan, the cornerback, 4-star 2024 recruit coming to your Clemson Tigers in Death Valley next season. Also went over the Tigers' strength of schedule and how tough it can be, and some of the worrisome spots on their 2023 college football schedule, as well as ranking and reacting to Locked On ACC's ranking of the top 5 offenses in the ACC. But as always, guys, listen, I thank y'all so much for all the love and support. Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it's available. Thank y'all for making Locked On Clemson your first listen today and every day, Monday through Friday. In terms of Monday's show, I'm going to get into Cade Klubnik and his last 2 performances for the 2022 season and what I'm expecting from him in 2023. What did the tape tell me? I'm going to check the tape and do a 2-parter on Monday's episode, guys, as well as, we always look at On the Prowl and some other things. So stay tuned for that on Monday. But guys, in terms of Twitter, you know what to do. You can find and follow me there, DP_NFL. Talk to me because I talk back. All right. Come and join the conversation again on Monday on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.